It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. Inside. It ain't the left side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the Fin Side here with Kat and Paul Pickin. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and on iHeartRadio. This is the 8th part of our 12-part series evaluating the Miami Dolphins roster. I'd say out of all of the positions that we've talked about here in the offseason, defensive tackle is probably one of the easiest ones to dissect. The top four are pretty solidly in place with Ndamukong Suh, Jordan Phillips, Davin Godchaux, and Vincent Taylor. Maybe somebody else sneaks into the mix there, but the big story of the offseason is really going to be what happens with Ndamukong Suh. There's a lot of talk about the Dolphins restructuring that contract. They did the same thing in 2016, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
It really is, and when we say interesting to see how it all shakes out, Ndamukong Suh is not going anywhere for anybody out there that's got some hair across their ass that he's going somewhere if he doesn't fix his contract. He is arguably one of the top two defensive tackles in football. Not only that, he's playing probably his best team football that I've ever seen out of the guy. And he's also a leader to the three young defensive tackles behind him in Davin Godchaux, in Jordan Phillips, in Vincent Taylor. So the Dolphins have a really strong young nucleus with probably the best older player, we'll go with, that they could have playing with them. They've got a lot of leadership from the outside as well, but really, I mean, you watch Ndamukong Suh with these guys game in, game out. You listen to them talk about things off the field. Ndamukong Suh, no bones about it, makes all three of those young kids better players. So for me, the defensive tackle spot's really solid, and unless somebody that just knocks your socks off is there in the draft, they don't even really need to do anything there.
No, I don't think they do either, and I'm totally with you on Suh. I mean, it's hard to make the argument that he wasn't overpaid for, but with that money, of course, anybody's going to be overpaid for at the defensive tackle spot, but I think he has more than lived up to those expectations. I mean, I cannot recall a game where I said, wow, Ndamukong Suh really got handled in that one. I mean, over the last couple of years, and I can recall just about every game that he has been a dominant force on the inside. I think the defensive philosophy for the offseason should be pretty simple, is that you keep Ndamukong Suh there. He's going to play at a high level for at least another couple of years. He's 31 now. And get fast linebackers behind him. That way that you can apply that pressure up front and you can have some speed on the back end. But the back end and the back seven is where the Dolphins need to improve there. Speaking of improvement, Jordan Phillips, a player that I was down on for really since the moment he was drafted. I mean, to me, a player that couldn't find the football ever, was hot and cold just about every time that he stepped out on the field. I started to see some real consistency with him throughout at least the last 6 games of the season, both against the run and the pass.
Kat, it's okay. You can come over to the Jordan Phillips fan club. I saved you a seat. We're good to go there. I mean, I definitely saw a lot of what you're saying with the hot and cold, but what we saw, those, and I hate to use the word hot flashes because, let's face it, he's probably not going through menopause, but the hot flashes that we saw out of Jordan Phillips were just so damn special that it's very hard to not be a fan and root for this guy, because what he could turn into is just an absolute monster. And I mean, when you look at the future of this position for this team, you've got the possibility that once Ndamukong Suh does move on, you've got an ever-growing, ever-evolving pair in Davin Godchaux and Jordan Phillips, two deceptively athletic defensive tackles for their size. I mean, I laugh every time I see Jordan Phillips drop back in coverage because he actually might intercept the football, but they can also push the pocket. So there's really a lot to like with these two kids.
Yeah, I'm with you. And this, to me, is Jordan Phillips might be the measuring stick for the front office of, have they learned from their mistakes of the past? Because it seems like the Dolphins, going back to even the Olivier Vernon and Charles Clay days, have always been 1 year late on extending the contracts of these types of players. Because if the Dolphins can extend Jordan Phillips, who is a free agent after this 2018 season, if they can extend him and put $5-6 million per year in his pocket as opposed to the $1 million he's making now, that would be a smart move. Because if he comes back and he plays these next 16 games in 2018 like he did the final 4 to 6 games in 2017, I don't think you're getting him back. I think he's going to be one of the most sought-after defensive tackles in the NFL. So in a worst-case scenario, you're getting him back at a very reasonable price, even if he doesn't play up to that potential. But at his worst, he's still going to be able to get on the football field. At his best, could continue to evolve into a dominant player that becomes that number one defensive tackle if and when Ndamukong Suh leaves in a couple years.
Yeah, I'm really excited for these guys. And one thing that I will say is I'm not against Miami grabbing a defensive tackle if the right value is there. Probably their best bet, if they're going to do that, is either A, grabbing a hybrid guy that can kick inside on some pass downs and kick back outside and really help them create some mismatches, or just getting a ridiculously raw developmental prospect, either in the late rounds or as an undrafted, that they can stash away on the practice squad and just work with for the next couple of years to potentially be a replacement, so they're not over a barrel. A lot of interesting things they can do with that.
Yeah, and they really got steals in the 5th and 6th rounds with Davin Godchaux and Vincent Taylor. I mean, I think Godchaux is a little bit limited, one-dimensional, didn't have a sack this year, but graded out very, very well. I mean, Godchaux to me as a player, I look at and say, you can't be an A+ at every position with every player. But what you could potentially be with Godchaux is you're going to have a cheap, good starter on a rookie contract for the next couple of years. Vincent Taylor kind of fits that same mold. If he's your third or fourth defensive tackle, then I still think you've got a good football player for a cheap price. He's squatty, he's country strong, and I think he's going to make an impact at least against the run. So a lot of interesting things. But overall, Paul, I look at the defensive tackle spot and say it doesn't make a lot of sense to either sign a free agent at any price or draft a defensive tackle in the first couple of rounds.
No, I'm with you 100%, which means there's always that odd chance that Mike Tannenbaum's going to go out and drop $10 million on a mediocre defensive tackle to come in and slide into the rotation. But barring that, I mean, it still won't make any sense, even if Tannenbaum were to push that envelope. So, yeah, I mean, with the other needs of this team, I don't see them making a huge splash at defensive tackle in the offseason unless it's some form of restructure in Ndamukong Suh like we started the show off with.
You bet. And that will do it for our wrap-up of the defensive tackle position. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and on iHeartRadio. This is Cat and Paul Pickin on the fin side, and if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the fin side. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the fin side. Inside. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the fin side. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what Brian, Cat, and Paul about to do.